In Book 2, Chapter 5 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, an episode called Avatar Day that aired on April 28, 2006, Aang is put on trial by a village for crimes committed by a previous avatar. The prosecution consists of a man with a painting and a grudge that is 300 years old. The defense consists of Sokka eating evidence, and the judge is a wheel of fortune that determines guilt or innocence by random chance. It is one of the silliest episodes in the series, but there is a line in that episode that sticks. A villager says something about how you can tell a lot about a person by who their enemies are. And this is true, and it is especially true of Avatar: The Last Airbender, a show that has some of the most complex, layered, and genuinely disturbing villains in the history of animated television. This video is about those villains, all of them, ranked not by power, not by screen time, not by how cool they look in a fight, but by darkness, by the depth of the harm they cause, by the weight of the choices they make, by the distance between who they could have been and who they became. Before we go further, subscribing helps keep long-form content like this coming. It is free and it takes 3 seconds. Now, let us begin with the shallowest waters and work our way down. The least dark villains in Avatar are the ones who are barely villains at all. They are obstacles more than antagonists. Speed bumps on the road to the Fire Lord. The pirates that appear in Book 1, Chapter 9, The Waterbending Scroll, which aired on April 29, 2005, are a good example. They are thieves who sell stolen goods. They form a temporary alliance with Zuko to capture Team Avatar, and the alliance falls apart because neither side trusts the other. They are greedy, opportunistic, and ultimately incompetent. They pose a physical threat to Team Avatar for approximately 1 episode, and then they are gone, washed down a river, their ship destroyed by Zuko's temper. There is no darkness here, there is no malice. The pirates are not driven by ideology or revenge or ambition. They want money. They want their scroll back. They're small-time criminals operating in a world at war, and their smallness is what makes them unthreatening. They are the Avatar world's equivalent of the bandits who show up in the first act of every adventure story. Just dangerous enough to create a scene, not dangerous enough to matter. The Rough Rhinos occupy a similar tier. They are a Fire Nation military unit that appears in several episodes, pursuing Team Avatar on the backs of domesticated Komodo rhinos. They are effective soldiers, they are competent fighters, and they are completely interchangeable. They have no individual personalities, no motivations beyond following orders, no inner lives that the show feels compelled to explore. They are uniforms with faces, dangers without depths. These are the villains at the surface of the show, the ones who create conflict without creating weight, the ones who challenge the heroes physically without challenging them morally. The ones who, when defeated, leave nothing behind. No questions, no guilt, no residue. Let us go deeper. Jet is the first villain in the show who makes you uncomfortable. And the reason he makes you uncomfortable is that he is not wrong. Jet appears in Book 1, Chapter 10. Jet, which aired on May 6, 2005. He is a teenage rebel who leads a group of war orphans called the Freedom Fighters. The Fire Nation killed his parents and burned his village. He has been fighting the Fire Nation since childhood. He is charismatic, idealistic, and completely willing to kill civilians if it serves his cause. Jet's plan in his debut episode is to flood a village occupied by Fire Nation soldiers. The flood would destroy the soldiers. It would also drown every civilian in the village, including elderly people and children who have nothing to do with the war. Jet knows this. He has calculated the cost and decided it is acceptable. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The village is collateral damage. The war is what matters. Aang stops him. Sokka warns the village. The flood comes, and the village is empty. No one dies, but Jet's willingness to kill innocents is established, and it is never retracted. He meant it. He would have drowned those people, and he would have slept that night with a clear conscience, because in his mind, every civilian in a Fire Nation-occupied village is complicit, and complicity is a death sentence. What makes Jet dark is not his violence. The show is full of violence. What makes Jet dark is his certainty. He has no doubt, no hesitation, no inner conflict. He has decided who the enemy is, and the definition includes everyone who lives on the wrong side of the line. Children, grandparents, merchants, farmers. If they live in a Fire Nation occupied village, they are the enemy. If they are the enemy, they deserve to drown. This is the logic of terrorism. And the show, airing on Nickelodeon in 2005, presents it through a handsome, sympathetic teenage boy who lost his parents to the same people he wants to kill. Jet is not a monster. He is a victim who became a perpetrator. He is a child who learned the wrong lesson from his trauma, and the show does not excuse him, but it does not dismiss him either. It takes his pain seriously. It takes his reasoning seriously, and then it shows you, clearly and without flinching, where that reasoning leads. It leads to a flooded village. It leads to the willingness to kill people who have done nothing wrong because they live in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jet reappears in Book 2, seemingly reformed. He tries to start a new life in Ba Sing Se. He appears to have abandoned the extremism that defined him, but the Dai Li brainwash him, and he dies, and the show never tells you clearly whether the brainwashing erased the extremist or whether the extremist was already gone. Jet's ambiguity extends to his final moments. You do not know who he was when he died. The version of Jet who drowned villages, or the version who wanted to leave the war behind. The show lets you wonder. Admiral Zhao occupies the next tier. Zhao is the primary antagonist of Book 1. He is a Fire Nation naval commander who competes with Zuko for the right to capture the Avatar. He is ambitious, arrogant, and brutal, and unlike Jet, he has no sympathetic backstory. He is not fighting for a cause he believes in. He is fighting for himself, for promotion, for glory, for the recognition of a Fire Lord he worships not out of loyalty, but out of ambition. Zhao's darkness is the darkness of the careerist, the man who commits atrocities not because he hates the enemy, but because atrocities advance his career. He does not burn villages because the people in them deserve it. He burns villages because burning villages is what gets you promoted in the Fire Nation military. He hunts the Avatar because capturing the Avatar would make him the most powerful man in the Fire Nation, after the Fire Lord himself. The apex of Zhao's darkness comes in the Book 1 finale, The Siege of the North, which aired on December 2nd, 2005. Zhao kills the moon spirit. He walks into the spirit oasis at the North Pole, where the moon and ocean spirits swim in mortal form as koi fish, and he kills the moon. He removes the moon from the sky. He eliminates waterbending worldwide. He strikes at the most fundamental level of the show's cosmology, at the spiritual foundations of an entire element. And he does it not because he has a plan for what comes next. He does it because he can. Because killing a spirit is the ultimate proof of power. Because no one has ever done it before. Zhao kills the moon spirit for the same reason that he does everything else in the series. Because it makes him feel important. Iroh warns him. Iroh tells Zhao that killing the moon spirit will throw the world out of balance. Zhao does not care. The balance of the world is an abstraction. His promotion is concrete. His glory is tangible. And the moon spirit is just a fish. Zhao dies at the end of Book 1. The ocean spirit, enraged by the death of its companion, drags him into the water. He disappears. He is not mourned. He is not remembered. He is simply gone, swallowed by the consequences of his own ambition, consumed by the element he tried to conquer. The darkness of Zhao is the darkness of small men with large power. Men who see the world as a ladder, and every person, every creature, every spirit as a rung. Men who climb and climb and climb and never look down to see what they are standing on, until the rung beneath them breaks and they fall and there is no one to catch them, because they never built anything worth catching. Deeper still, the Dai Li are the next tier, and they are among the most unsettling antagonists in the series, because they are not individuals, they are an institution. The Dai Li are the secret police of Ba Sing Se, the Earth Kingdom capital. They were founded by Avatar Kyoshi, who lived approximately 400 years before the events of the series. Kyoshi created the Dai Li to protect the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. They were meant to be guardians, preservers, defenders of the city's identity against internal and external threats. By the time of the series, the Dai Li have become something else entirely. They serve Long Feng, the Grand Secretariat of Ba Sing Se, who uses them to suppress all information about the 100-Year War. The citizens of Ba Sing Se do not know there is a war. They do not know the Fire Nation has been conquering the world for a century. They do not know that refugees are pouring into the lower ring, fleeing violence that the upper ring pretends does not exist. The Dai Li maintain this ignorance through surveillance, intimidation, and brainwashing. The brainwashing is the darkest element. The Dai Li use a technique involving a darkened room, a lantern swinging on a track, and the repeated phrase, "There is no war in Ba Sing Se." Subjects are hypnotized into believing this statement. Their memories are altered, their personalities are reshaped. They emerge from the process as loyal, obedient citizens who have no recollection of the war, of their past, of anything that contradicts the official narrative. Jet is subjected to this process. When Team Avatar finds him in Ba Sing Se, he has been brainwashed by the Dai Li. He has no memory of his life as a freedom fighter. He has been turned into a compliant citizen, his personality erased, his identity replaced with a fiction. The process is, when you strip away the fantasy elements, a depiction of totalitarian mind control, and it is presented on a children's show in detail without softening. The Dai Li's darkness is systemic. It is not the cruelty of one person. It is the cruelty of a system that has been designed, maintained, and perpetuated by hundreds of people over centuries. Each individual Dai Li agent is following orders. Each one has been trained to believe that the suppression of truth is a form of protection. Each one has rationalized their actions as necessary for the stability of the city. And collectively, they have created a state apparatus that erases memories, suppresses information, and controls the population through institutionalized deception. This is darker than Zhao's ambition. Zhao is one man. The Dai Li are a machine, and machines are harder to stop, harder to dismantle, harder to hold accountable, because no single part of the machine is responsible for what the machine does. The agent who swings the lantern is not responsible for the policy. The officer who gives the order is not responsible for the execution. The leader who designed the system is dead, and the machine keeps running because machines do not have consciences. Machines do what they are built to do. Feng sits at the center of this machine, and he's a different kind of darkness from Zhao. Zhao wanted glory. Feng wants control. Not control of armies or navies or nations. Control of information. Control of what people believe is true. Feng is introduced in Book 2, and he is in many ways the show's most realistic villain. He does not shoot lightning. He does not command fleets. He does not have a tragic backstory or a terrifying power. He has something worse. He has bureaucratic authority. He controls the flow of information in the largest city in the world. He decides what the Earth King knows and does not know. He decides what the people believe and do not believe. He is the gatekeeper, the editor, the man who stands between the truth and the public and decides every single day what gets through. Feng's darkness is the darkness of the censor, of the propagandist, of the information controller who believes, sincerely believes, that the public cannot handle the truth and must be protected from it. Feng is not evil in the way that Ozai is evil. He does not want to burn the world. He wants to manage it. He wants to curate reality. He wants to shape the world into a version that is orderly and comprehensible and safe. And he is willing to brainwash, imprison, and disappear anyone who threatens that order. The most chilling thing about Feng is that he has a point. Ba Sing Se is stable. The citizens are not panicking. The cultural institutions are intact. The war is, from the perspective of the upper ring, irrelevant. Feng has created a bubble of normalcy inside a world at war. And the bubble works. People are living their lives. People are happy. People are safe. The cost is truth. The cost is the lower ring where refugees live in poverty and fear. The cost is Jet's mind, erased and rewritten. The cost is the Earth King's ignorance maintained for years by the man who is supposed to serve him. The cost is the collective delusion of an entire city, sustained through violence and deception, fragile and unsustainable but functional. For now, as long as no one asks the wrong questions. When Azula arrives in Ba Sing Se, she dismantles Feng's operation in a matter of days. She offers the Dai Li a better deal, more power, more authority, allegiance to the Fire Nation instead of the Earth Kingdom. And the Dai Li accept because the Dai Li were never loyal to Ba Sing Se. They were loyal to whoever controlled the machine. Feng built the machine. Azula seized it, and Feng, the man who controlled information, discovered that information is not the same as power. Power is the ability to make people follow you. And Azula, with her blue fire and her absolute confidence, was better at that than Feng ever was. Feng's defeat is instructive. He spent years building a system of control so comprehensive that it could suppress the knowledge of a century-long war from an entire city. And it was undone in a week by a 14-year-old girl who understood something that Feng did not. That control is an illusion. That systems can be seized. That the man who builds the cage is just as vulnerable to it as the man inside it. Combustion Man occupies his own category. He is not psychologically complex. He is not sympathetic or layered or nuanced. He is simply frightening. A walking weapon, a man who can kill you with his mind. He does not speak. He does not negotiate. He does not explain himself or justify his actions or show any sign of inner life. He pursues, he destroys. He is relentless and impersonal and unstoppable until he is not. The darkness of Combustion Man is the darkness of dehumanization. Not his dehumanization of others, though he certainly treats his targets as nothing more than obstacles. His own dehumanization, he has been reduced to a function. He is a tool, a weapon hired by Zuko and aimed at the Avatar. He has no identity beyond his utility, no name, no history that the show bothers to share, no past, no future, no present, that is not defined by violence. This is a different kind of darkness from the political darkness of the Dai Li or the ambitious darkness of Zhao. It is existential. It is the darkness of a person who has been stripped of everything that makes a person and replaced with a single capability. Combustion Man is what happens when a human being is valued only for what they can do, not for who they are. He is the logical endpoint of the Fire Nation's militarism, a soldier so perfectly optimized for war that nothing else remains. No conversation, no pleasure, no connection, just the third eye and the explosion and the target and the pursuit. And when Zuko tries to call him off, tries to cancel the contract, Combustion Man attacks Zuko too, because the weapon does not serve the person who hired it. The weapon serves its own function. It kills because killing is what it does. And the person who pointed the weapon is just as vulnerable to it as the person it was pointed at. This is the show's warning about weaponization, about what happens when you create something designed only to destroy. The destroyer does not distinguish between friend and enemy. It destroys. That is all. And the darkness of that is not in the violence itself, but in the absence of everything else. In the void where a personality should be. In the silence where a voice should be. In the blank, purposeful, terrifyingly efficient emptiness of a man who has been optimized out of his own humanity. Hama takes us deeper. Hama appears in a single episode, Book 3, Chapter 8, The Puppet Master, which aired on November 9th, 2007. She is an elderly waterbender from the Southern Water Tribe who was captured by the Fire Nation during one of their raids and imprisoned for years. In prison, she discovered bloodbending, the ability to manipulate the water inside a human body. She used bloodbending to escape, and then, consumed by decades of rage and trauma, she settled in a Fire Nation village and began kidnapping Fire Nation civilians, imprisoning them in a cave beneath a mountain, turning them into puppets, practicing on them the same violation that was practiced on her. Hama is the show's most sympathetic villain. Her suffering is real. Her anger is justified. Everything that was done to her was monstrous. The Fire Nation raided her tribe, captured her people, and locked her in a cage for years. She endured things that the show does not describe in detail, because the detail would be too dark for its audience. And when she finally escaped, she was no longer the person who went in. The darkness of Hama is the darkness of what trauma does when it is not healed. When it is left to fester, when the victim has no support, no community, no way to process what happened. Hama's bloodbending is not a power she sought. It is a power that her suffering created. She bent the water in the rats that ran through her cell, slowly, painfully, over years, until she was strong enough to bend the guards. And when she was free, she did not seek peace. She sought revenge, not against the people who had captured her, who were probably long dead, against the Fire Nation as a concept, against any Fire Nation citizen, regardless of their individual guilt, against the nation itself, embodied in the bodies of its people, whom she puppeted and imprisoned the way she had been puppeted and imprisoned. Hama is a mirror of Jet. Both are victims of the Fire Nation. Both became perpetrators. Both direct their rage at civilians who bear collective but not individual guilt. The difference is that Hama's suffering was longer, deeper, more total. Jet lost his parents. Hama lost her people, her freedom, her identity, and decades of her life. And the depth of her suffering does not excuse her actions, but it explains them in a way that is deeply uncomfortable, because it suggests that enough pain can turn anyone into a monster. That cruelty is not a character trait, but a consequence. That the line between victim and perpetrator is not a wall, but a door, and enough trauma will push anyone through it. Katara's horror at learning bloodbending from Hama is the show's moral response. Katara refuses the technique. She sees in Hama a possible future, a version of herself that could exist if her own trauma were left to fester, if her own anger were never processed, if her own grief were transmuted not into healing but into harm. Katara rejects this future. But the fact that she can bloodbend, the fact that the power exists within her, means that the rejection is a choice, not a given. Katara chooses not to become Hama, but she could. And the darkness of that could is the darkness of Hama's entire existence. We are in the deep water now. Fire Lord Sozin is a villain who never appears in the present tense of the show. He is dead before the first episode begins, but his shadow falls across every frame of the series because he is the man who started it all. The 100-Year War, the Air Nomad Genocide. the colonization of the Earth Kingdom, the raids on the water tribes, the corruption of firebending from an art of creation into a weapon of destruction. All of it traces back to Sozin. Sozin appears in flashback in Book 3, Chapter 6, The Avatar and the Fire Lord, which aired on October 26, 2007. The episode reveals that Sozin and Avatar Roku were best friends. They grew up together, they trained together, they were as close as brothers. And then Sozin began to believe that the Fire Nation's prosperity should be shared with the world, whether the world wanted it or not. This is the most insidious kind of darkness, the darkness that believes it is light. Sozin did not see himself as a conqueror, he saw himself as a benefactor. He believed that the Fire Nation's advanced technology, sophisticated culture, and powerful bending made it the natural leader of the world. He believed that spreading Fire Nation influence was a gift, not an imposition. He believed, with the absolute sincerity of the true ideologue, that he was making the world better. Roku tried to stop him. Roku warned him. Roku destroyed a Fire Nation colonial outpost with his bare hands to make the point. And Sozin listened for a while. He waited. And when Roku died, betrayed by Sozin himself on a volcanic island where Sozin could have saved him but chose not to, Sozin was free. Free to pursue his vision. Free to share the Fire Nation's greatness with the world. Free to exterminate the air nomads because the next avatar, the person who would inevitably oppose his vision, had been born among them. The genocide was not an act of rage, it was an act of policy. Sozin killed the air nomads the way a gardener kills weeds, methodically, dispassionately, because they were in the way. Because they represented a spiritual tradition that would produce the avatar, and the avatar would challenge his plan, and his plan was too important to be challenged. This is darker than Zhao's ambition, darker than Long Feng's control, darker than Hama's trauma, because Sozin's darkness is rational. It is calculated. It is the product of a clear mind and a sincere belief and the absolute conviction that the ends justify the means. Sozin is the show's argument that the most dangerous person in the world is not the madman, but the idealist. Not the person who acts without thinking, but the person who thinks without feeling. Not the person who wants to destroy the world, but the person who wants to save it. On his terms, by his methods, regardless of the cost. The safe houses are the worst detail. After the initial assault on the temples, Sozin created false sanctuaries and spread rumors about them through the Earth Kingdom. Surviving airbenders, desperate and hunted, came out of hiding and went to the safe houses and were killed. Sozin used hope as a weapon. He used the survivors' desire for safety against them. He turned the most basic human instinct, the instinct to seek shelter, into a death trap. This is systematic evil. This is the evil of bureaucracies and policies and carefully planned operations. This is the evil that fills out forms and keeps records and sleeps well at night, because the killing is happening somewhere else, carried out by someone else according to a plan that someone else designed. Sozin is the architect who draws the blueprints for the slaughterhouse and never visits the killing floor. And the show presents this history not as ancient evil, but as active legacy. Sozin's ideology survived him. It was passed down through Azula to Ozai. It was taught in Fire Nation schools. It was baked into the culture, the politics, the identity of the nation. 100 years after Sozin's death, Fire Nation children were still being taught that the air nomads were eliminated because they posed a threat to civilization. That the war was a civilizing mission. That the Fire Nation was bringing order to a chaotic world. This is the darkness of ideology. Not the darkness of one man's cruelty, but the darkness of a belief system that outlives its creator and continues to generate harm long after the original architect is dead and buried. Sozin is gone. His ideology is still alive in every Fire Nation schoolroom, in every military briefing, in every citizen who has been taught to believe that conquest is kindness. Azula. Azula is 14 years old throughout the events of the series. This fact should be stated first, before anything else, because it changes everything that follows. She is 14 years old and she conquers Ba Sing Se. She is 14 years old and she nearly kills the Avatar. She is 14 years old and she manipulates, intimidates, and terrorizes everyone around her with a precision and a coldness that would be remarkable in an adult, and is genuinely disturbing in a child. Azula's darkness is not the same as Sozin's. Sozin's darkness is ideological. Azula's is personal. She does not act out of belief in the Fire Nation's mission. She does not care about spreading Fire Nation culture or bringing order to the world. She cares about one thing: control. Control of herself, control of others, control of every variable in every situation. She is the most controlled character in the show, and her control is so complete, so total, so unrelenting that it is indistinguishable from cruelty. Azula manipulates everyone. Her friends, her enemies, her brother, her father. She lies the way other people breathe, automatically, without effort, without thought. She tells Zuko what he wants to hear. She tells Long Feng what he wants to hear. She tells the Dai Li what they want to hear. And none of it is true. All of it is calculated. Every word she speaks is a tool designed to produce a specific effect in a specific person at a specific time. The show gives you flashes of what is underneath the control. In The Beach, Book 3, Chapter 5, which aired on October 19, 2007, Azula tries to socialize with teenagers her own age at a party. She does not know how. She cannot turn off the manipulation. She approaches a boy she finds attractive, and her idea of flirting is to declare that they will dominate the earth together. She is incapable of genuine connection because she has never been taught what genuine connection looks like. Every relationship she has ever had, with her father, with her mother, with her brother, with Mai and Ty Lee, has been transactional. Power exchanged for loyalty. Fear exchanged for obedience. And Azula has been on the powerful side of every transaction for so long that she has forgotten or never learned that there is another way. Her breakdown in the finale is the most devastating sequence in the series. Azula banishes her servants. She banishes her Dai Li agents. She banishes her advisors. One by one, she removes every person around her until she is alone in the palace with a mirror and a hallucination of her dead mother. She cuts her own hair with a knife. She cries. She screams. She breathes fire at her own reflection. This is not villainy. This is a child having a mental breakdown. This is a 14-year-old girl who has been raised as a weapon, discovering that weapons, when no longer needed, are discarded. Ozai left her behind. He named her Fire Lord, but the title was hollow. He took the real power with him and left Azula with a crown and an empty palace and no one to control and nothing to be. Azula's darkness is the darkness of the child soldier, the prodigy who was cultivated not for their benefit, but for someone else's. The talented child who was told their talent was their value and who believed it, and who discovered too late that the person who told them this was not investing in them, but exploiting them. Azula is not a villain who happens to be a child. She is a child who was made into a villain by the people who should have protected her. And the show, to its eternal credit, shows you both layers, the terrifying antagonist and the broken child, the blue fire and the tears, the conqueror of Ba Sing Se and the girl who cannot make a friend without threatening them. Azula is dark because she is sad, and the sadness is dark because it was avoidable. All it would have taken is one adult who loved her without conditions, one person who saw the child instead of the prodigy, one hand that reached for her without wanting something in return. But that person did not exist. Ursa tried, perhaps, but Ursa favored Zuko, and Azula knew it, and the knowledge of being the unfavored child in a family where favor was the only currency was the first wound, the wound that everything else grew from. Ozai. Fire Lord Ozai is the final villain of the series. He is the man who burned his own son's face, the man who banished Zuko, the man who planned to use Sozin's comet to burn the entire Earth Kingdom to the ground. He is the most powerful firebender in the world, and he is the least complex villain in the show, and his simplicity is paradoxically what makes him the darkest. Ozai does not have a sympathetic backstory. The show does not tell you what made him this way. It does not give you a childhood trauma, a formative loss, a moment of betrayal that explains his cruelty. He is simply cruel. He is cruel the way gravity is gravitational. It is his nature. It is what he does. The Agni Kai with Zuko is the darkest single moment in the series. It occurs in flashback in Book 1, Chapter 12, The Storm, which aired on June 3rd, 2005. Zuko, who is 13 years old, speaks out of turn in a war meeting. He objects to a plan that would sacrifice an entire division of Fire Nation soldiers as bait. He is told that his outburst is a challenge to the person whose plan he criticized. He is told he must fight an Agni Kai. Zuko expects to fight the general whose plan he challenged. Instead, he turns around and finds his father standing before him. Ozai, the Fire Lord, his father. Zuko will not fight. He kneels, he begs for forgiveness. He says he is his father's loyal son, and Ozai burns him. Ozai holds his hand to his 13-year-old son's face and brands him with a scar that will define him for the rest of his life, and then he banishes him. This is child abuse. Unambiguous, deliberate, public child abuse, committed by a father against his son, in front of an audience of Fire Nation military officials, as an example. As a lesson, as a demonstration of what happens to people who show weakness. And the darkness of Ozai is that this act is not his worst. Burning his son's face is not the worst thing he does. The worst thing he does is what he does to Azula. Because Zuko, scarred and banished, was set free. He was cast out of the palace and into the world. And the world saved him. He met Iroh, he met the people of the Earth Kingdom, he saw the war from the other side. His banishment was his liberation. Azula was kept. She was held close, rewarded, cultivated, sharpened, polished, refined into the perfect weapon. And every reward was a chain. Every praise was a leash. Every moment of approval was a lesson in conditional love, in the idea that she was valued not for who she was, but for what she could do. Ozai did not burn Azula's face. He burned her mind. He burned her capacity for trust, for vulnerability, for connection. He took the parts of her that were soft and he cauterized them until nothing soft remained. Zuko's scar is visible, Azula's is not, and the invisible scars are always deeper. Ozai's darkness is the darkness of the parent who destroys their children, who sees their children not as people but as extensions of themselves, who measures their children's worth by their utility and discards them when they fail and exploits them when they succeed. Ozai is not just a villain, he is the most common kind of monster in the real world. The parent who makes their love conditional, the father who withholds approval, the authority figure who punishes vulnerability and rewards performance and creates through the simple, devastating arithmetic of conditional love, a child who does not know how to be loved and does not believe they deserve it. This is the darkness at the bottom, the darkness that the show keeps reaching toward and pulling back from, showing you glimpses but never the full picture. Because the full picture would be too much for a children's show, too much for any show, too much for the human mind to hold all at once. But there is one more level. The darkest villain in Avatar, The Last Airbender, is not a person. It is the system. The Fire Nation is not dark because of Ozai. Ozai is dark because of the Fire Nation. He is the product of a culture that valorizes power, that teaches its children that strength is the only virtue, that measures worth by conquest. That has spent 100 years convincing itself that the war is a civilizing mission, and the genocide was a strategic necessity, and the colonies are gifts, and the suffering of other nations is the price of progress. Ozai did not create this culture, he inherited it, he was raised in it, he breathed it, and it made him what he is. The same way it made Azula what she is. The same way it would make you what you are, if you grew up in it, if you were taught its lessons, if you believed its stories, if you never met an era who showed you a different way. The system is the darkest villain because it is the one that no single person can defeat. Aang defeats Ozai. Zuko takes the throne. The war ends. But the Fire Nation's culture does not change overnight. The beliefs do not evaporate. The propaganda does not vanish from the textbooks. The generation that was raised to believe in the Fire Nation's superiority does not wake up the next morning and suddenly see the world differently. The Legend of Korra explores this aftermath. Republic City, the show's primary setting, is a product of Fire Nation colonialism. The political tensions, the inequality, the cultural conflicts that drive Korra's narrative are all consequences of the system that Aang dismantled on the surface, but that continues to operate beneath it. The system is patient, it is persistent, it adapts, it finds new forms, it outlasts the people who challenge it. This is the show's deepest and most uncomfortable argument. That evil is not a person, it is not a choice, it is not a flaw in individual character. Evil is a system, a culture, a set of beliefs and institutions and practices that perpetuate harm regardless of the individual intentions of the people within them. Good people can participate in evil systems. Kind people can enforce cruel policies. Loving parents can raise children who become monsters, because the system that shapes the parents shapes the children. And the system does not care about individuals. The system cares about perpetuation. The system cares about survival. The system cares about reproducing itself generation after generation, until someone or something interrupts the cycle. Aang interrupts the cycle. Zuko interrupts the cycle. Iroh interrupts the cycle. But the cycle was running for 100 years before they intervened, and the damage it caused will take centuries to repair. The air nomads are gone. The water tribes are diminished. The Earth Kingdom is fractured. And the Fire Nation, the nation that caused all of this, will have to live with what it did, will have to teach its children the truth, will have to dismantle the very identity that made the war possible. This is the work that happens after the hero wins. The work the show does not show. The slow, unglamorous generational labor of changing a culture, of replacing the stories that justify harm with stories that prevent it. Of teaching children who were raised on propaganda to think for themselves. of building a world in which the next Ozai cannot rise because the conditions that created him no longer exist. This work is harder than defeating a Fire Lord. It is harder than ending a war. It is the hardest work there is, and it is the work that Avatar, despite being a children's show, asks its audience to understand as necessary. The villains of Avatar are ranked by darkness, but the ranking is misleading because the pirates are not separate from Zhao, and Zhao is not separate from the Dai Li, and the Dai Li are not separate from Long Feng, and Long Feng is not separate from Sozin, and Sozin is not separate from the system that created him. They are all connected. They are all expressions of the same darkness refracted through different people at different scales. The pirate who steals a scroll and the Fire Lord who burns a continent are both products of a world in which power is the primary value. The difference is scale. The darkness is the same, and the light is the same too. The light that opposes the darkness, the light that Aang carries, the light that Zuko discovers, is not a superhero's power. It is a choice, a daily, ongoing, never-finished choice to value something other than power, to see people as people, to treat vulnerability as strength, to believe that the world can be changed not through conquest, but through compassion. The villains of Avatar are dark. Some of them are very dark, but the show's argument, delivered through 3 seasons and 61 episodes and a finale that chose mercy over justice, that it can be interrupted, that the cycle can be broken, that even the darkest system can be dismantled, one choice at a time, one generation at a time, one person at a time. And tonight, as these words fade and the darkness of the villains gives way to the darkness of the room, you are carrying that argument with you. You are carrying the knowledge that cruelty has causes, that evil has origins, that the worst people in the world were made, not born, and that the making can be undone slowly, patiently, with the same care and attention that the show brings to every character it creates. The villains are sleeping now. Zhao is at the bottom of the ocean, Long Feng is in a cell, Combustion Man is dead, Hama is imprisoned, Sozin is centuries gone, Azula is somewhere unknown and unresolved, and haunted, Ozai is in chains, his bending gone, his power stripped, his legacy crumbling. And the system is still there, still operating, still producing the conditions that create villains and reward cruelty and punish vulnerability, but it is weaker than it was. The cycle is interrupted. The work of dismantling continues. And the people who do that work, the teachers and the healers and the leaders and the ordinary citizens who choose every day to value something other than power, are the real heroes of the Avatar world. Not because they fight, because they build. Not because they destroy evil, because they make evil unnecessary. And the show that told this story, that ranked these villains, that measured their darkness, and found beneath the darkness the human beings who were consumed by it, that show is still here too, still teaching, still illuminating, still shining its quiet, persistent light into the corners where the darkness lives, not to destroy it, but to understand it, and through understanding, to begin the long, slow, never-finished work of setting it right. But we have moved too quickly. We have named the villains and measured their darkness, but we have not sat with them long enough. We have not felt the weight of what they represent. And this is a long night, and the darkness deserves attention, because understanding darkness is the only way to recognize light. Let us return to some of them. Let us go deeper. Jet deserves more time, because Jet is the show's most uncomfortable villain, and the discomfort is the point. When Jet floods the village in Book 1, Sokka is the one who saves the civilians. Sokka, who is 15 years old, who has no bending, who is armed with a boomerang and a bad attitude, evacuates an entire village while Jet cuts the dam. Sokka saves lives. Jet would have taken them, but here is the detail that makes Jet truly unsettling. He is not wrong about the problem. The Fire Nation occupation is real. The suffering is real. The villages controlled by Fire Nation soldiers are sites of genuine oppression. Jet's diagnosis is correct. His prescription is monstrous, and the gap between the two, between seeing the problem clearly and responding to it destructively, is the gap that separates the revolutionary from the terrorist. The show does not use either word. It does not need to. The audience understands intuitively that Jet has crossed the line, and the line is not between violence and non-violence, because the show is full of violence. The line is between violence directed at combatants and violence directed at civilians. Jet erases this distinction. He treats the population as the enemy. He treats the village as a military target. And in doing so, he becomes the thing he claims to be fighting. He becomes someone who kills innocent people for a cause. And the show premiered in 2005, 4 years after September 11th. The language of terrorism and counterterrorism was everywhere. The question of when violence against civilians becomes justified, and whether it ever is, was the defining question of the decade. And Avatar, a cartoon on Nickelodeon, addressed it through a 16-year-old boy with hooked swords and a piece of grass in his mouth. It did not preach. It did not lecture. It simply showed you a boy who loved his people and hated his enemies and could not see where one ended and the other began. And it let you feel the chill of recognition. This is what the best villains do. They make you recognize something, not in the villain, in yourself, in the world, in the patterns of human behavior that repeat across cultures and centuries, and that the show, through the safe distance of animation and fantasy, allows you to examine without the defensiveness that real-world analogies provoke. Zhao deserves more time too, because Zhao's death is one of the most poetic moments in the series, and poetry in a show about villains is rare. When the ocean spirit takes Zhao, it does not kill him instantly. It reaches up from the water and wraps around him. Zuko, who has been Zhao's rival for the entire season, extends his hand. He offers to save Zhao, and Zhao, drowning, consumed by the spirit he provoked, looks at Zuko's hand and refuses it. He would rather die than accept help from the boy he considers beneath him. His pride kills him. His ambition kills him. The very quality that drove him to kill the moon spirit, the need to be the biggest, the best, the most powerful, is the quality that prevents him from accepting the hand that could save him. The show later reveals, through the legend of Korra, that Zhao did not die. Not exactly. He was taken to the fog of lost souls, a prison in the spirit world, where he wanders for eternity, muttering about capturing the Avatar, trapped in an endless loop of the ambition that defined and destroyed him. He is not dead. He is frozen, locked in the moment of his greatest desire, repeating it forever, unable to move past it, unable to grow, unable to change. This is the show's judgment on ambition without wisdom. Not death, something worse, eternity in the grip of the thing you wanted most. The endless repetition of the desire that consumed you, the spiritual equivalent of getting exactly what you asked for and discovering that it is a prison. Consider now the relationship between the Dai Li and the idea of loyalty. The Dai Li are the most loyal characters in the show. They are absolutely, unshakably, terrifyingly loyal. But their loyalty is not to a person or an ideal. It is to the structure of power itself. They served Koshi, they served Feng, they served Azula, they will serve whoever controls the machine, because the machine is all they know. They are not loyal to Ba Sing Se. They are loyal to the practice of control, to the skills they have spent their lives perfecting, to the identity they have constructed around their function. This makes them, in some ways, more frightening than any individual villain, because individual villains can be defeated, they can be imprisoned, or redeemed, or killed. But the Dai Li cannot be defeated by removing a single person. They are a culture within a culture, a belief system within a belief system. They believe that control is necessary, that the truth is dangerous, that the population must be managed for its own good. And these beliefs do not die when their leader is deposed. They transfer, they attach to the next leader. They persist because they are not one person's ideas. They are an institution's ideas. And institutions outlive people. When Azula turns the Dai Li against Feng, the scene is often read as a triumph of charisma over bureaucracy. Azula is more compelling than Feng. She is younger, more powerful, more confident. But the deeper reading is darker. The Dai Li do not follow Azula because she is more compelling. They follow her because she is more willing to use them. Feng maintained the Dai Li's power within limits. Azula promises them unlimited power. And the Dai Li, loyal to power itself, choose the offer that maximizes their function. This is the logic of every authoritarian transition in history. The secret police do not fall with the dictator. They pivot. They serve the new regime. They transfer their skills and their infrastructure and their institutional memory to whoever sits in the chair next. And the people who suffer under the old regime continue to suffer under the new one, because the suffering was never personal, it was structural. And structures survive. Let us spend more time with Sozin, because Sozin's friendship with Roku is the most important relationship in the show's backstory, and its destruction is the seed from which all the show's darkness grows. Sozin and Roku were friends from childhood. They sparred together, they laughed together. When Roku was identified as the Avatar, Sozin was genuinely happy for him. There is no indication in the flashback that young Sozin was cruel or ambitious or predisposed to evil. He was a boy, a prince, a friend. The change happened gradually. Sozin watched the Fire Nation grow and prosper while other nations remained less developed. He saw his people's technological achievements, their cultural sophistication, their military strength, and he began to believe that these achievements gave the Fire Nation a responsibility, not just a right. A responsibility. The Fire Nation had discovered things that could benefit the world. Better agriculture, better engineering, better bending techniques. And Sozin felt that keeping these advances to himself, hoarding them within his borders, was selfish. He wanted to share. He wanted to help. This is the ideology of empire, the civilizing mission, the white man's burden. The idea that one culture is so advanced, so developed, so superior that it has a moral obligation to impose itself on the rest of the world, for the rest of the world's benefit. Sozin did not invent this idea. He inherited it. It was in the air of the Fire Nation, in its schools and its courts and its temples. Sozin simply took it seriously, more seriously than anyone before him. And Roku saw what was coming. Roku saw that sharing was a word for conquering. That help was a word for domination. That the Fire Nation's civilizing mission was, underneath the rhetoric, a campaign of expansion and control. And Roku confronted Sozin, and their friendship died, and Sozin waited. And when Roku died on the volcano and Sozin chose not to save him, the last obstacle to the civilizing mission was removed. The show presents this with extraordinary nuance. Sozin is not a cackling villain. He is a thoughtful man with a dangerous idea. He is the person at the dinner party who says something that sounds reasonable on the surface, but that, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, leads to genocide. He is the intellectual, the philosopher, the man whose ideas are more dangerous than any army, because ideas can outlive armies, and ideas can infect generations, and ideas can make good people do terrible things because they believe the terrible things are necessary. Sozin's darkness is intellectual darkness, the darkness of the well-reasoned argument that leads to mass murder, the darkness of the spreadsheet that reduces human lives to numbers, the darkness of the policy paper that recommends extermination as a strategic option. This is the coldest darkness in the show. Not heat, not rage, not the burning fury of Ozai, but the cold, clear, logical progression from premise to conclusion. From the belief that one nation is superior to the decision that inferior nations should be conquered, from the decision that inferior nations should be conquered, to the conclusion that the people who resist should be eliminated. From the conclusion that resistors should be eliminated to the order to exterminate the air nomads. Each step is logical. Each step follows from the one before it, and the total journey from friendship to genocide is one of the most devastating arcs in the history of animated storytelling. Sozin's comet returns every 100 years. The show names it after him, and the naming is deliberate. A comet is a celestial event. It is something that happens to the world, not something the world chooses. And Sozin, through his choices, through his ideology, through his cold and careful reasoning, turned himself into something similar. A force that the world did not ask for and could not avoid. A destructive event wearing the face of a man who once had a best friend. The Fire Nation that Sozin built did not crumble when he died. It grew. His son continued the war, his grandson continued the war. 3 generations of the same family, carrying the same idea, extending the same mission, spreading the same fire across the same world. And the citizens of the Fire Nation, the ordinary people who were not royalty, who were not generals, who were not politicians, absorbed the ideology like oxygen. They breathed it. They taught it to their children. They believed it, not because they were evil, but because it was the only story they had ever been told. This is what makes Sozin the most important villain in understanding the show's argument. He is the origin, the patient zero, the first domino. Every villain after him, from Azula's cruelty to Ozai's tyranny, to the Daily's erasure of truth, is a downstream consequence of Sozin's original sin. The belief that one nation's greatness justifies another nation's subjugation. And the show asks you to sit with an uncomfortable truth about Sozin. He was not wrong about the Fire Nation's achievements. The Fire Nation was technologically advanced. It did have innovations that could have benefited other nations. The premise was accurate. The conclusion was monstrous. And the distance between an accurate premise and a monstrous conclusion is shorter than you think. It is the distance of a single word: help, share, civilize. Each of these words sounds generous. Each of these words, in Sozin's mouth, meant conquest. And the tragedy is that Sozin may not have known the difference. He may have genuinely believed, all the way to his death, that what he was doing was good. This is the darkness that keeps you awake at night. Not the villain who knows they are a villain. The villain who believes truly and deeply and sincerely that they are the hero. The show introduces Azula in Book 2, and her arrival changes everything. Before Azula, the villains of Avatar are dangerous in specific, limited ways. The pirates want treasure, Jet wants vengeance, Zhao wants glory. Each of them has a single motivation, a single drive, a single need that, however destructive, can be understood in a sentence. Azula cannot be understood in a sentence. Azula cannot be understood in a paragraph. Azula may not be fully understandable at all. And this is precisely what makes her the most frightening character in the show. She appears for the first time in the final moments of Book 1, a figure in shadow, and the camera treats her the way you would treat an approaching storm. Something inevitable. Something you cannot prepare for. And when Book 2 begins and Azula steps into the light, the show immediately establishes that she operates on a different level from every villain who came before her. Consider what Azula accomplishes in Book 2 alone. She tracks Zuko and Iroh across the Earth Kingdom. She infiltrates Ba Sing Se, the most fortified city in the world, with exactly 2 companions. She turns the Dai Li, the most disciplined intelligence force on the continent, to her side in a matter of days. She defeats the Avatar, she conquers a city that has never been conquered, and she does all of this at the age of 14. The show never lets you forget her age. It is perhaps the most important detail about Azula. She is a child who can lightning bend, a child who can manipulate adults twice her age into doing exactly what she wants, a child who defeated the Avatar, something her father never managed to do, and a child who in the quiet moments between the victories is falling apart so completely that the final season shows you the pieces. Azula's relationship with fear is the key to understanding her darkness. She says it explicitly in one of the show's most revealing lines of dialogue. Fear is the only reliable way. This is not a philosophy she arrived at through abstract reasoning. This is a survival strategy. Azula grew up in a household where love was conditional, where performance was mandatory, where failure was punished and success was expected, and the space between punishment and expectation was so thin that there was no room for a child to simply be a child. Ozai loved Azula the way a general loves a weapon. He valued her because she was useful. He praised her because she performed, and Azula, who was brilliant enough to understand the terms of the arrangement, adapted perfectly. She became the weapon her father wanted. She became the prodigy her father demanded. She became, in every measurable way, the perfect Fire Nation princess. And the cost was her soul. You see the cost most clearly in Azula's relationships. She does not have friends. She has subordinates. Mai and Ty Lee are not her companions. They are her resources. She deploys them strategically. She manages them through a combination of intimidation and reward. And when they betray her, when Mai chooses Zuko over Azula at the Boiling Rock, when Ty Lee chi blocks Azula to protect Mai, the betrayal does not just anger Azula. It breaks something fundamental in her understanding of how the world works. Azula's worldview is built on the assumption that fear is sufficient. That if you are powerful enough, if you are frightening enough, if you are competent enough, people will obey. And the Boiling Rock proves this assumption wrong. Mai and Ty Lee, the 2 people closest to Azula in the world, choose love over fear. They choose each other over Azula. They demonstrate through their actions that Azula's entire philosophy is built on a lie. And Azula cannot process this. She cannot integrate it, the information that fear is not sufficient. That love is more powerful than fear, that the people she controlled were never truly loyal. This information is so devastating to Azula's core identity that it triggers a psychological collapse that plays out across the final episodes of the series. The mirror scene. You know the one. Azula, alone in her room before her coronation, cutting her own hair with sharp, uneven strokes, talking to a reflection of her mother that is not there. The reflection says what Azula has never allowed herself to believe. That Ursa loved her. That Azula was not a monster. And Azula screams and shatters the mirror and the camera holds on her face and you see, for the first time, the child underneath the armor. The child who wanted her mother's love. The child who wanted to be told she was good. The child who adapted to a world that valued only performance and who performed so perfectly that she forgot there was anything else. This scene aired on July 19, 2008 during the 4-part series finale, Sozin's Comet. And it is, in many ways, the emotional climax of the entire show. Not the fight between Aang and Ozai, not the comet, not the bending battles or the military strategies or the political maneuvering. A 14-year-old girl, alone in a room, breaking a mirror because she cannot bear to look at herself. Azula's Avni Kai with Zuko is the most visually stunning fight in the series. The animators made a deliberate choice to remove the soundtrack and replace it with a single, mournful piece of music. No sound effects, no dialogue during the bending sequences, just blue fire and orange fire spiraling across the screen in silence. And the music telling you what the fight means, which is not triumph or defeat, but tragedy, pure, undiluted tragedy. Zuko wins, or more precisely, Azula loses. She loses because she has lost control, because the collapse that began at the boiling rock has accelerated through her coronation and her paranoia, and her dismissal of every servant and advisor until she is alone, completely alone. The way she has always been alone underneath the performance of power. And when Katara chains her to the grating and the water freezes and Azula screams and thrashes and breathes fire that goes nowhere, you are watching the end of a child who never had a chance. The show does not redeem Azula. This is important. It does not give her a moment of clarity or a change of heart or a reconciliation with Zuko. It leaves her chained and screaming. It leaves the question open: can Azula be saved? Can the damage be undone? Can the child underneath the armor be reached? The show does not answer. It simply shows you the question and trusts you to carry it. And this is Azula's true darkness. Not her power, not her cruelty, not her lightning or her blue fire or her strategic genius. Her darkness is the darkness of a child who was shaped into a weapon by a father who only loved weapons. Her darkness is inherited, manufactured, installed the way you install software on a machine, overwriting whatever was there before until the original operating system is gone and only the program remains. Ozai installed Azula, and the installation was so thorough, so complete, so perfectly executed that by the time the show gives you Azula, the child underneath is almost invisible. Almost, but not quite. Because the show is careful. The show gives you glimpses. The beach episode, the mirror scene, the moment when Azula tells Zuko that Ursa thought she was a monster, and her voice cracks just slightly on the word monster. These glimpses are the show's argument that Azula is not a monster, that the monster was made, that the darkness was installed, and that, somewhere beneath all the programming, there is a girl who wanted her mother to stay. Ozai is the last individual villain on this list, and he presents a paradox. He is the most powerful antagonist in the show. He is the Fire Lord. He commands the largest military in the world. He possesses firebending ability that, enhanced by the comet, makes him arguably the most physically dangerous human being on the planet. And yet, as a character, he is the least developed villain on this list. The show gives you less backstory for Ozai than for almost any other antagonist. You know he is Sozin's grandson. You know he competed with Iroh for the throne. You know he burned Zuko's face. You know he values power above all else. And that is nearly everything the show tells you. This lack of development is not a flaw. It is a choice, and the choice reveals something profound about the show's understanding of evil. Ozai does not need a backstory, because Ozai is not an individual. Ozai is a product. He is what Sozin's ideology produces when it runs unchecked for 3 generations. He is the grandson of the idea that one nation's greatness justifies another nation's subjugation. He is the logical endpoint of the civilizing mission. If your culture is superior, then your leader is the embodiment of that superiority. And if your leader is the embodiment of superiority, then your leader's will is the will of superiority itself. And questioning it is not dissent but treason. And treason is not a political act but a moral failure. And moral failures deserve punishment, and the punishment is fire. This is the chain of reasoning that produces Ozai. And Ozai, having been produced by this chain, becomes its most extreme expression. He does not burn Zuko's face because he is angry. Though he is angry, he burns Zuko's face because Zuko spoke out of turn in a war meeting, and speaking out of turn is a challenge to authority and a challenge to the natural order. And challenges to the natural order must be corrected with fire. Each step follows from the one before it, and the chain is so tight, so logical, so internally consistent that Ozai may not even understand what he has done. He may not understand that he has harmed his son. He may understand only that he has corrected a deviation from the natural order. The Agni Kai between Ozai and Zuko, the one where the scar is made, happens before the show begins. You only see it in flashback, and the flashback is structured so that you experience it the way Zuko experiences it, in fragments. In disbelief, the horror unfolds slowly. Zuko begs. Ozai does not listen. Zuko falls to his knees. Ozai raises his hand. The camera cuts away, and the next time you see Zuko, he has the scar, and the scar is the show's permanent reminder that Ozai's darkness is not abstract. It is physical. It is on Zuko's face. You see it in every episode, every scene, every moment of the show. The scar is Ozai's signature, his mark on the world, his contribution to his son's story. Consider what it means to burn your own child's face. Consider the decision that precedes the action. Consider the moment when Ozai, standing in the arena, looking down at his 13-year-old son, who is kneeling and crying and begging for mercy, decides that the lesson is more important than the child. That discipline is more important than love. That the Fire Lord's authority is more important than a boy's face. This is the coldest moment in the show. Colder than the genocide, colder than the war. Because the genocide is political and the war is strategic, but this is personal. This is a father and a son in a room. And the father chooses power over parenthood. And the choice is so absolute, so total, so without hesitation or remorse, that it defines both characters for the rest of the series. Zuko becomes the boy who was burned by his father. Ozai becomes the father who burned his boy. The show never gives Ozai a redemption arc. It never shows you the human being underneath the Fire Lord. It never suggests that Ozai has doubts or regrets or moments of vulnerability. And this is the choice, the deliberate narrative choice, that makes Ozai work as the final boss of the series. He is not a person you need to understand. He is a system wearing a crown. He is what happens when an ideology takes human form. And the fight between Aang and Ozai, the final fight, the big one, is not really a fight between two people. It is a fight between compassion and control, between mercy and power, between the idea that every life has value and the idea that value is determined by obedience. Aang wins. But Aang does not win by being stronger than Ozai. He wins by being different from Ozai. He wins by refusing to kill. He wins by finding a third option that nobody expected, the ability to take away Ozai's bending without taking his life. And this is the show's final argument about villainy, that you do not defeat darkness by becoming dark yourself, that you do not defeat a system of violence by using greater violence, that the path out of the cycle is not through it, but around it, through the door that nobody sees, through the option that nobody expects. Ozai, bendingless and defeated, kneeling in the crater, is the image the show leaves you with. Not a dead villain. A diminished one, a man stripped of the power that defined him, left alive to reckon with what he has done without the ability to do it again. This is not justice in the traditional sense. This is something stranger. Something more uncomfortable. This is what happens when compassion meets cruelty and refuses to become cruel in response. You can feel the weight of that choice. The weight of Aang's refusal to kill. Every mentor told him to do it. Roku told him, Koyoshi told him. The monks would not have approved, but the practical voices, the experienced voices, the voices that knew what Ozai was capable of, all of them said the same thing. Kill him, end the war, remove the threat. And Aang said no. A 12-year-old boy, carrying the weight of the entire world on his shoulders, said no to everyone who had ever been Avatar before him. Said no to the collective wisdom of 10,000 years. Said no because he believed stubbornly and irrationally and beautifully that there had to be another way. And there was. The system is the final villain, and the system is the hardest to see. It does not have a face, it does not have a throne, it does not shoot fire or lightning or bend the earth beneath your feet. It sits behind every other villain on this list, invisible and patient and enormous, shaping behavior and belief and identity with a consistency that no individual villain could match. The Fire Nation school system is the system made visible. In Book 3, Episode 2, The Headband, which aired on September 28, 2007, Aang infiltrates a Fire Nation school while hiding in the enemy's territory. And what he finds there is not cruelty, not propaganda, exactly. Something subtler, something more insidious. History lessons that erase the air nomads, geography lessons that frame other nations as inferior, music classes that teach only military marches. Physical education that emphasizes discipline over creativity. The children in the Fire Nation school are not being taught to hate. They are being taught to not question. And the difference matters. Hatred is active. It requires energy, it burns hot, and eventually burns out. But the absence of questioning is passive. It requires nothing. It is the default state. It is what happens when you remove all the alternatives and present the remaining option as the only option and never at any point suggest that there might be others. The Fire Nation children are good children. They are polite, they are studious. They follow the rules, they sit when told to sit and stand when told to stand, and recite the oath of the Fire Lord with their hands over their hearts. And they believe, because they have never been given a reason not to believe, that their nation is great and good, and that the war is just, and that the Fire Lord is wise, and that the world would be better if everyone lived the way they live. These children are not villains. They are the raw material from which villains are made. Aang disrupts the school with a dance. This sounds absurd when you describe it. A 12-year-old boy from the past throws a secret dance party in a Fire Nation school cave. But the show treats the scene with extraordinary weight, because dancing, in this context, is not entertainment. It is revolution. The Fire Nation children have never danced, they have never moved their bodies in ways that were not prescribed. They have never expressed themselves through physical joy. And when Aang shows them how, when he takes their hands and spins them, and encourages them to feel the music instead of marching to it, the camera shows you their faces, and on those faces is something that looks like awakening. Like the first breath after being underwater for a long time. The dance is subversive, because freedom is subversive. In a system built on control, spontaneity is an act of rebellion. In a culture built on conformity, individuality is dangerous. And Aang, without meaning to, without even understanding what he is doing, plants seeds of doubt in children who have never doubted. He shows them that there are other ways to be, other ways to move through the world, other ways to hold your body and express your feelings and interact with other people that do not involve hierarchy and obedience and the suppression of joy. The episode ends with the school authorities discovering the dance. The party is broken up, the children return to their desks, and the system continues undisturbed the way systems always continue. But the seeds are planted, the children have seen something they cannot unsee. And the show trusts you to understand what this means. That systems are not defeated in a single battle. That they are defeated one mind at a time, one dance at a time, one moment of freedom at a time, in the spaces between the lessons, in the silence between the marches, in the private corners where the curriculum cannot reach. Ba Sing Se is the system's masterpiece. A city of walls within walls within walls, each wall separating a class from the class above it, each wall enforcing a hierarchy that the people inside have accepted so completely that they no longer see it as hierarchy. They see it as geography, they see it as the way the city is built. They do not question why the wealthy live in the upper ring, and the poor live in the lower ring, and the king lives behind the inner wall, and the truth lives nowhere at all. The Dai Li do not burn villages. They do not shoot lightning. They do not command armies or drop bombs or wage open war. They do something far more effective. They erase, they take inconvenient truths, and they remove them from the public consciousness. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. This is not a lie, exactly. It is a deletion, a selective amputation of reality. The war exists, people are dying, but inside the walls of Ba Sing Se, behind the careful maintenance of the Dai Li, the war is an absence. A gap in the conversation that nobody fills because filling it would be impolite. Ju Di is the system's face. She smiles, she welcomes visitors, she guides them through the city with practiced grace and rehearsed enthusiasm. And when Team Avatar asks about the war, her smile does not falter. Her voice does not change. She simply redirects. The weather is lovely today. The Cultural Heritage Quarter has wonderful restaurants. Have you visited the university? The redirection is seamless, professional, terrifying. Ju Di is a victim. The Dai Li brainwashed her the way they brainwash everyone who asks inconvenient questions. They took her to a room beneath the lake, and they used the lantern, the one that swings back and forth with the green light, and they told her things until the things she knew were replaced by the things they wanted her to know. And now she smiles. And now she believes, genuinely believes, that there is no war in Ba Sing Se. The brainwashing chamber beneath Lake Laogai is the single most disturbing location in the entire series. It is worse than the war rooms, worse than the boiling rock, worse than the volcano where Sozin watched Roku die. Because those locations destroy bodies. Lake Laogai destroys minds. It takes the most intimate thing a person possesses, their own thoughts, their own memories, their own understanding of what is true, and it replaces them with something manufactured, something false, something that serves the system. Jet dies at Lake Laogai, or at least the show implies he dies. His final scene in the tunnels beneath the lake is deliberately ambiguous. He is injured, he tells the others to go. They go. And the show cuts away, and Jet is never seen again. The creators confirmed after the show ended that Jet dies in that scene. But they chose, deliberately, to make the death invisible. To make it happen in the gap between scenes. To let the audience carry the uncertainty the way you carry a stone in your pocket. Always there, always heavy, never resolved. Jet's death in the system's basement is the show's darkest image. A teenage boy, killed in a secret underground facility that does not officially exist, by agents of a government that does not officially acknowledge the war. That Jet spent his life fighting. His death is not heroic. It is not dramatic, it is not the death of a warrior on the battlefield, it is the death of a nuisance, a deletion, a removal of an inconvenient person by a system that specializes in the removal of inconvenient truths. The system kills Jet the way the system kills everything. Quietly, off-screen, without acknowledgement. And the world continues and the walls remain and the Dai Li patrol the streets and Jody smiles and there is no war in Ba Sing Se. Long Feng built this system. Or rather, Long Feng refined it. The walls were there before him. The class structure was there before him. The monarchy was there before him. But Long Feng understood something that his predecessors did not. He understood that power does not require a throne. It requires information, control the information, and you control the people. Control the people, and you control the king. Control the king, and you control the city. And control the city, and you control the largest population center in the Earth Kingdom, without anyone, including the king himself, understanding that you are doing it. Long Feng is the bureaucrat as villain, the administrator as tyrant. He is the man behind the curtain, except there is no curtain, because he has convinced everyone that there is nothing to hide. He is the most dangerous kind of liar, the kind who controls what counts as truth. And when Azula arrives in Ba Sing Se, when she walks into Long Feng's carefully constructed system and takes it from him in a matter of days, the show reveals something devastating about the nature of bureaucratic power. It is fragile. It works only as long as no one challenges it. It depends on the assumption that everyone will follow the rules, and when someone refuses to follow the rules, when someone operates outside the system's logic, the system breaks. Long Feng controlled the Dai Li through habit, through hierarchy, through the careful distribution of rewards and punishments within a framework of rules. Azula controlled the Dai Li through something simpler and more ancient, fear. And fear in that moment proved stronger than structure. The system is the villain that survived the show. Ozai is defeated. Azula is broken. The war is over. But the structures that produced the war, the schools that taught obedience, the walls that enforced hierarchy, the mechanisms that erased inconvenient truths, those structures do not dissolve when the Fire Lord falls. They persist. They adapt, they find new purposes. And the show, by ending where it ends, by choosing not to show you the aftermath, trusts you to understand that the real work is only beginning. Zuko becomes Fire Lord. Aang restores balance. The nations begin to heal. But the children, who were taught not to question, do not suddenly learn to question. The walls of Ba Sing Se do not suddenly fall. The institutional habits of a century of war do not evaporate in a season. The system that produced every villain on this list is damaged but not eliminated. Quiet but not silent. And this is the show's deepest, most uncomfortable truth about villainy. Villains can be defeated. Systems cannot be defeated in the same way. You cannot fight a system in an Agni Kai. You cannot take away a system's bending. You cannot chain a system to a grating and watch it scream. A system is not a person. It is a pattern, and patterns do not die. They change shape, they find new hosts. They express themselves through new mouths and new hands and new faces. And the only weapon against a pattern is awareness, the ability to see the pattern, to name it, to refuse to participate in it, even when participation is easy, even when participation is rewarded, even when non-participation is punished. The show taught an entire generation of children this lesson. Through pirates and generals and puppet masters and prodigies and fire lords and secret police, in a city where there is no war, the show spelled out, carefully and patiently and with extraordinary compassion, the nature of darkness and the price of looking away. The darkness in Avatar is not supernatural. It is not magic. It is not bending or spirits or cosmic forces. The darkness is human. The darkness is choices. The darkness is the gap between what we know is right and what we do when doing right is difficult. And the villains, all of them, from the petty pirates to the genocidal Fire Lord, inhabit that gap. They live in the space between knowing and doing. And the show's argument, made through 3 books and 61 episodes and 100 hours of storytelling, is that the gap can be closed. Not easily, not painlessly, not by everyone. By the uncle who lost his son, by the prince who lost his honor, by the boy who lost his people, by anyone willing to look at the darkness and say, not this, not anymore, not in my name. You have been listening to the darkness for a long time now. You have heard about pirates and generals and brainwashers and prodigies and fire lords. You have heard about systems and ideologies and the mechanisms by which ordinary people become instruments of extraordinary harm. And you are still here. You have not looked away. That matters more than you think. The show's villains are defined by their refusal to see, their refusal to acknowledge the consequences of their choices, their refusal to look at the people they are hurting and recognize them as people. And you, lying in the dark, listening to this catalog of cruelty and complexity and tragedy, are doing the opposite. You are seeing, you are acknowledging. You are looking at the villains and recognizing them not as monsters from a cartoon, but as reflections of patterns that exist in the real world, in your world, in the systems you inhabit and the choices you face every day. The difference between a villain and a person is not power, it is not bending or crowns or armies. The difference is attention, the willingness to pay attention to the consequences of your choices. The willingness to look at the people around you and see them. Really see them as complete human beings with their own fears and hopes and struggles. The willingness to sit in the discomfort of your own fallibility and say, I might be wrong. I might be causing harm. I might be participating in a system that I do not fully understand. And that participation might be hurting people I have never met. This is what the show gives you, if you let it. Not answers, questions. Awareness. Not the comfort of knowing who the villains are and feeling righteous about opposing them, but the harder, more valuable discomfort of recognizing that villainy is not a category of person. It is a category of behavior, and behavior can change. Behavior is the one thing in the world that is always, always within your control. Iroh proved it. Zuko proved it. The children at the dance party proved it. For one brief, beautiful, dangerous moment before the system reasserted itself. And you can prove it too. Not with fire or lightning or the strength of 100 past lives. With attention. With awareness. With a quiet, stubborn, daily practice of seeing clearly. There is something else the show does with its villains that deserves attention, and it is the thing that separates Avatar from almost every other animated series of its era. The show gives its villains pain. Not the dramatic, cathartic pain of a final battle. Not the sudden pain of defeat. The slow, accumulating, structural pain of being shaped by forces you did not choose. The kind of pain that sits in the body like sediment. The kind that builds up over years and hardens into behavior and calcifies into identity until you cannot separate who you are from what was done to you. Azula's pain is the clearest example, but it is not the only one. Jet lost his parents to the Fire Nation. The show tells you this in a single sentence, early in his first episode, and then moves on as if the information is incidental. But it is not incidental. It is everything. Jet's entire character, his obsession with fighting the Fire Nation, his willingness to kill civilians, his inability to distinguish between soldiers and villagers. All of it flows from that single sentence. His parents were killed, he was a child, and nobody saved him. Nobody intervened. Nobody held him and told him it would be okay. He was left alone with his grief and his rage and his need for justice, and the grief curdled into something toxic, and the rage found targets, and the justice became indistinguishable from revenge. Jet is what happens when a society fails to care for its children. Not through active cruelty, the way Ozai fails Zuko and Azula, but through passive neglect. Through the absence of systems designed to catch falling children and hold them until they can stand again. Jet fell, and nobody caught him, and by the time you meet him, he has been falling for years, and the speed of the fall has become indistinguishable from flight. He looks like a leader, he sounds like a hero. His cause is just. His methods are monstrous. And the show asks you to hold both of these truths at the same time without resolving them into something simple. Hama's pain is older and deeper. She was captured by the Fire Nation during the raids on the Southern Water Tribe. She was taken from her home, from her family, from everything she knew, and she was put in a cage. A metal cage, designed specifically to hold waterbenders. And she stayed in that cage for years. How many years the show does not say. Long enough for her hair to turn white. Long enough for her to develop a bending technique that nobody had imagined before. Long enough for the cage to become her world and the absence of water to become her defining experience. Bloodbending is born from captivity. It is a technique developed in the dark in desperation by a woman who had been denied every element of her identity except the one thing her captors could not take. Her will, her determination. Her refusal to accept the cage as permanent. And when she discovered that there was water in the bodies of the rats that scurried through her cell, and that she could bend that water, and that bending that water gave her power over living creatures, the discovery was not triumphant. It was terrible, because the technique required her to cross a line that waterbending had never crossed before. The line between bending an element and bending a person, between controlling water and controlling flesh, between defending yourself and dominating another living being. Hama crossed that line, and the crossing was so total, so irreversible, so fundamentally damaging to her sense of who she was, that by the time she escaped the cage, she was no longer the woman who had been put in it. She was something new, something that looked at Fire Nation civilians, at ordinary people who had nothing to do with the raids or the cages or the war, and saw not people, but representatives, symbols, stand-ins for the system that had caged her, Hama's darkness is retributive. It is the darkness of a person who has been so deeply wronged that wronging others begins to feel like balance, like justice, like the universe correcting itself through her hands. She takes Fire Nation villagers and she imprisons them in a mountain. And the imprisonment mirrors her own imprisonment. And the symmetry is deliberate because symmetry feels like fairness. An eye for an eye, a cage for a cage. Suffering for suffering. The math works out, the equation balances, except it does not. Because the villagers she imprisoned are not the people who imprisoned her. They are strangers. They are civilians, they are people whose only crime is living in the wrong nation during the wrong century. And Hama knows this, she must know this. But the knowledge does not stop her because the pain is louder than the knowledge. The pain has been talking for so long, for so many years in that cage, that it has become the only voice she hears. The show places Hama's episode, The Puppet Master, in Book 3, Episode 8, which aired on November 9th, 2007. And the episode is structured like a horror story, complete with disappearances and full moons and an old woman with a secret. But the real horror is not the bloodbending. The real horror is the recognition that Hama is what Katara could become. That the same element, the same bending tradition, the same cultural heritage that gives Katara her strength could, under different circumstances, with different experiences, produce not a healer, but a puppeteer. Not a protector, but a predator. Katara defeats Hama by using bloodbending against her, and the victory is not a victory. It is a loss. Because in using bloodbending, Katara crosses the same line that Hama crossed. And even though she crosses it for the right reasons, even though she crosses it to protect her friends, the crossing changes her. You can see it in her face after the fight. The horror, the revulsion, the understanding that she now carries inside her the capacity for the same darkness that consumed Hama. Not the technique, the capacity, the knowledge that it is possible, that the line can be crossed. That she, Katara, daughter of the Southern Water Tribe, healer and protector and hero, has inside her the same potential for manipulation and control that turned Hama into a monster. This is the show's most mature argument about villainy. That villainy is not a fixed trait, it is a potential. Everyone carries it. The difference between Hama and Katara is not genetic or spiritual or elemental. It is experiential. Katara had a brother and friends and a cause that was larger than her pain. Hama had a cage. Give Katara the cage and take away the brother and the friends and the cause, and you do not get a hero. You get Hama. Give Hama the brother and the friends and the cause and take away the cage, and you do not get a villain. You get Katara. The villains of Avatar are not aliens. They are not incomprehensible forces of evil that exist outside the normal range of human experience. They are people. People who were put in cages, literal or figurative. People who were burned, literally or figuratively. People who were taught lies and rewarded for believing them. People who were hurt and responded to the hurt by hurting others. People who were failed by the systems that should have protected them, and who in their failure became failures themselves. Not because they were predestined to fail, because the circumstances conspired, because the safety nets had holes, because the world is not fair and the distribution of suffering is not equal. And some people get the brother and the friends and the cause, and some people get the cage. This is not an excuse. The show is very clear about this. Understanding a villain is not the same as forgiving a villain. Ozai's ideology does not excuse the scar on Zuko's face. Azula's childhood does not excuse the conquest of Ba Sing Se. Hama's imprisonment does not excuse the kidnapping of innocent civilians. Sozin's sincerity does not excuse the genocide. The actions are wrong. The damage is real. The victims deserve justice. But the show insists, with a persistence that borders on stubbornness, that understanding matters. That seeing the villain as a person matters. That recognizing the forces that shape the villain matters. Not because understanding leads to forgiveness, because understanding leads to prevention. If you understand how Ozai was made, you can stop making Ozais. If you understand how the system produces monsters, you can change the system. If you understand the path from pain to villainy, you can intervene at the points where the path turns dark and offer a different direction. This is the show's gift, not entertainment, though it is entertaining, not escapism. The gift is a framework, a way of looking at evil that does not reduce it to a simple story of good versus bad, hero versus villain, light versus dark. A way of looking at evil that sees the machinery underneath, the gears and levers and feedback loops that turn ordinary people into instruments of extraordinary harm. And the show's implicit promise, the promise it makes through Iroh, through Zuko, through Aang's refusal to kill, is that if you can see the machinery, you can change it. Not quickly, Not easily, not all at once, but piece by piece, gear by gear, choice by choice, dance by dance, in the spaces between the lessons, in the silence between the marches, in the stubborn and unreasonable and beautiful belief that people can be better than the systems that shape them. Zhao deserves a closer look. He is easy to underestimate as a villain because he shares screen time with Zuko in Book 1, and Zuko is so much more interesting that Zhao can feel like a placeholder, the arrogant military commander. The obstacle between Zuko and the Avatar, the man who exists primarily to lose fights and make bad decisions. Zhao is the show's portrait of what happens when ambition replaces identity, when the desire for recognition becomes so consuming that it overrides every other instinct, including self-preservation. Zhao discovers the location of the ocean and moon spirits through research. He finds the information in Wan Shitong's library, which means he is educated. He reads, he studies. He pursues knowledge with the same intensity that he pursues military objectives. And the knowledge he gains about the moon spirit does not humble him. It does not inspire awe or reverence or caution. It gives him an idea, a terrible idea, an idea so reckless and so grandiose that even Io, who has seen everything the Fire Nation has to offer, tries to stop him. Zhao kills the moon spirit. He reaches into the oasis at the North Pole, where the physical form of the moon spirit swims in a circle with the ocean spirit, and he kills it. He kills a god. He kills a fundamental force of the natural world. He disrupts the balance of the entire planet because he believes that doing so will win him a promotion. The show presents this moment as the most dangerous thing any villain does in the entire series. Not the most personally cruel, not the most emotionally devastating, the most dangerous. Because Zhao is not attacking a person or a nation or an army, he is attacking reality itself. He is attacking the thing that makes waterbending possible. The thing that controls the tides. The thing that has existed since before humans, since before bending, since before the separation of the four nations. He is attacking a spirit that predates civilization, and he is doing it because he wants Admiral Zhao to be remembered as the man who won the war. This is ambition without wisdom, power without understanding, the willingness to break something cosmic for the sake of something personal. And the show makes clear, through Iroh's horrified intervention, through the sky going dark, through Princess Yu sacrificing herself to restore the balance, that Zhao's action nearly ended everything. Not just the war, not just the water tribe. Everything. The moon controls the tides affect the entire planet. Killing the moon spirit is the equivalent of pulling a thread that holds the universe together, and Zhao pulled it because he wanted his name in a history book. Zhao dies in the finale of Book 1. The ocean spirit, merged with Aang in the Avatar state, creates a massive water entity that destroys the Fire Nation fleet and drags Zhao into the sea. Zuko reaches out a hand to save him. Zhao refuses the hand. He would rather drown than accept help from a prince he considers beneath him. And this final refusal, this final assertion of pride over survival, is the show's definitive statement about what ambition without wisdom produces. Not victory, not glory, not the recognition that Zhao craved. Drowning, alone, in the dark, with a hand reaching toward you that you are too proud to take. The show reveals in The Legend of Korra that Zhao's spirit ended up in the fog of lost souls in the spirit world, a place where spirits wander endlessly, repeating the same patterns, unable to move forward, unable to change, unable to escape the loops of their own making. Zhao is there, still muttering about capturing the Avatar, still pursuing the same ambition, still refusing to accept that his quest ended decades ago. He is the show's image of what happens when ambition becomes identity, when the wanting becomes so central to who you are that even death cannot separate you from it. The Rough Rhinos ride through the show's background like a persistent threat that never quite rises to the level of primary antagonist. They appear in the Avatar Day episode. They appear in the Siege of the Northern Air Temple. They appear in flashbacks to the raids on the Southern Water Tribe. And each appearance reveals a different facet of what military power looks like when it is divorced from ideology, from strategy, from any higher purpose. The Rough Rhinos are mercenaries. They fight because fighting is what they do. They do not share Sozin's ideology. They do not care about the civilizing mission. They do not think about the moral implications of their actions. They think about targets and tactics and terrain. They are the human instruments of war, stripped of everything except the instrumentation. And the show uses them strategically to remind you that war is not only produced by ideologues and tyrants and prodigies. It is also produced by the people who show up and do the work. The people who follow orders not because they believe in the orders, but because following orders is their job, and their job pays, and the alternative to having a job is not having a job. This is a kind of darkness the show handles with surprising subtlety for a children's program. The Rough Rhinos are not evil in the way Ozai is evil or Azula is evil. They are complicit. They are the gears in the machine. They are the hands that hold the tools of empire without questioning who built the tools or what the tools are for. And the show's treatment of them, brief and scattered across episodes, is its acknowledgement that systemic evil requires more than leaders and ideologues. It requires a workforce. It requires ordinary people who agree to do extraordinary damage in exchange for ordinary compensation. Combustion Man has no name. The show never gives him one. The characters call him Combustion Man because they have nothing else to call him, and the absence of a name is the point. He is a tool, a weapon, a function. He is what happens when you reduce a human being to a single capability and pay for that capability and point it at your enemies. Zuko hires Combustion Man. Zuko, who is on his journey toward redemption, who is beginning to question his father's ideology, who is starting to see the world clearly, hires an assassin to kill the Avatar. And the hiring reveals something uncomfortable about redemption arcs. They are not clean, they are not linear, they do not proceed in a straight line from darkness to light. Zuko, even as he is turning toward the good, takes a detour through the worst. He commissions a murder. He sets in motion a chain of events that he cannot control. And when he eventually joins Team Avatar and tries to call off the hit, Combustion Man refuses to stop. The weapon, once fired, cannot be recalled. Combustion Man's third eye is his bending focus. He generates explosions through a tattoo on his forehead, a form of firebending so specialized that it barely resembles firebending at all. And the specialization is a metaphor. A person who has developed one ability to the exclusion of all others. A person who has sacrificed breadth for depth, humanity for efficiency, personhood for function. Combustion Man cannot speak to his targets because he has nothing to say to them. He cannot negotiate because negotiation is not his function. He can only do the one thing he was built to do, which is destroy. And he does it with mechanical precision until the mechanism fails, and he destroys himself. His death at the Western Air Temple is caused by Sokka's boomerang striking his third eye during a blast. The explosion rebounds. Combustion Man is killed by his own power, redirected by a flaw in his own design. And the show's message is clear, though it never states it explicitly. A person who becomes a weapon eventually falls to the same forces they unleash. A person who gives up their humanity for power gives up the thing that might have saved them from that power. The pirates from Book 1 are not dark at all, in the context of everything else on this list. They are greedy, they are amoral, they are willing to chase a group of children across a river for a stolen waterbending scroll. But they do not burn faces, they do not erase minds, they do not kill gods. They are the show's baseline, the reminder that villainy begins small, that the first step toward darkness is not a dramatic choice, but a mundane one. The choice to value a thing over a person. A scroll over a child, a prophet over a principle. And the show's decision to begin here with the mundane villainy of greed and to end with the systemic villainy of ideology and empire is its structural argument in miniature. Darkness escalates. It begins with a stolen scroll and it ends with a genocide. It begins with a pirate and it ends with a system. It begins with a choice to value things over people and it ends with the construction of an entire civilization around that choice. A civilization so elaborate and so entrenched and so normalized that the people inside it cannot see it for what it is. You can see it, you are outside it. You are lying in the dark, and you can see the whole structure from the pirates at the bottom to the system at the top. And you can see the connections, the threads, the mechanisms, the choices that link one villain to the next. And the seeing is the beginning of the work. There is a conversation that happens in the last season of Avatar that is easy to overlook because it is quiet and short and sandwiched between action sequences that demand more of your attention. It happens between Aang and Zuko, and it is about a question that has been building since the first episode of the show. What do you do with a villain you cannot defeat? By fighting, Ozai is coming, the comet is coming, the war is building toward its climax, and Aang, who has been training for this moment for 3 seasons, who has mastered 3 elements and is working on the 4th, who has fought pirates and generals and prodigies and puppet masters, faces a problem that none of his training has prepared him for. He does not want to kill Ozai. This is not naivety. This is a 12-year-old boy wrestling with the most fundamental moral question a person can face. When is it justified to take a life? When does the cost of mercy exceed the cost of violence? When does refusing to kill become complicity in future suffering? These are not children's questions. These are the questions that philosophers and ethicists and military strategists have debated for millennia. and the show places them on the shoulders of a child who likes to ride penguins and play with his lemur. Aang seeks counsel. He talks to his past lives. He talks to Roku, who tells him to be decisive. He talks to Kyoshi, who tells him that inaction is a form of failure. He talks to Yan Chen, an air nomad like himself, and even she, even the one past life who should understand his reverence for life, tells him that his duty to the world outweighs his duty to his principles. Every avatar before him says the same thing. Kill Ozai. The world needs it. The balance requires it. Your personal beliefs are secondary to the cosmic responsibility you carry. And Aang listens, and he hears, and he understands, and he says no. The lion turtle gives him another option, energy bending. The ability to manipulate the energy within a person to take their bending away without taking their life. And the show has been criticized for this, for introducing a solution in the final act that was not foreshadowed earlier. But the criticism misses the point. The point is not the mechanism, the point is the choice. The choice to seek an alternative when every authority figure in the history of the Avatar cycle told you there was none. The choice to refuse the obvious answer because the obvious answer violates something you hold sacred. The choice to bet the world on the belief that there is always another way. This is the deepest thing the show says about villainy. That the way you respond to villains defines you as much as the villains themselves. That the fight against darkness is not won by becoming darker. That the answer to cruelty is not greater cruelty. That the answer to a system of violence is not a more efficient system of violence. The answer is something harder. Something that requires more creativity, more courage, more faith in the possibility of an outcome that nobody has imagined yet. Aang imagined it. A 12-year-old boy standing at the edge of the most important fight in the history of his world imagined an option that no avatar before him had considered. And then he made it real. He reached into Ozai's chest and he took the fire away and he left the man alive. Powerless, diminished, but alive. Breathing, existing, forced to live in a world where his power was gone and his ideology was defeated, and the only thing remaining was the man underneath the Fire Lord, whoever that man was, whoever he had been before the ideology consumed him. The show does not tell you who that man is. It does not need to. Because the show's argument, the argument that runs through every villain and every hero and every choice in 61 episodes, is that the man underneath the Fire Lord is the same thing that exists underneath every villain on this list. A person, a human being who was shaped by forces they did not choose, and who made choices within those forces, and who might, under different circumstances, with different teachers, with different experiences, have become someone else entirely. This is not optimism. This is not naive faith in human goodness. This is something more complicated and more demanding than optimism. This is the recognition that evil is not a property of individuals. It is a property of systems and circumstances and choices. And if evil is a property of choices, then different choices can produce different outcomes. And different outcomes are always possible, right up until the last moment, right up until the fire is released, right up until the scar is made. Zuko's scar was made. It cannot be unmade. But Zuko's life after the scar, the long and painful and beautiful journey from banished prince to Fire Lord, from villain to hero, from the boy who chased the Avatar to the man who fought beside him, proves that the scar is not the end of the story. The scar is a chapter, a terrible chapter, a chapter that should never have been written. But a chapter, not the book. And the book, Zuko's book, is about becoming, about the endless, exhausting, rewarding process of becoming the person you choose to be, rather than the person your circumstances made you. About doing the work, the real work. The work that Eero models with tea and patience and proverbs and unconditional love. The work that the show insists is available to everyone, even the worst of us, even the most damaged, even the most lost. The villains of Avatar are dark. Some of them are very dark. Some of them do things that are unforgivable by any reasonable standard. But the show refuses to let the darkness be the final word. The show insists, with the stubbornness of a 12-year-old who will not kill, that the final word is choice. And choice is the one thing that belongs to everyone. Consider one more thing before the darkness settles. Consider the moments in the show where the villains are not being villains. The moments that exist in the cracks of the narrative, the brief pauses between the cruelty and the strategy and the ideology, where the person underneath surfaces for just long enough to remind you that they are there. Zhao in the library, reading by candlelight, his face illuminated by the glow of ancient texts, his expression not predatory but curious. For a moment, for just a moment, he is a scholar. A man who reads, a man who loves knowledge for its own sake, and then the knowledge gives him a weapon, and the scholar disappears, and the Admiral returns. But the scholar was there. The scholar existed. Azula on Ember Island at a party, trying to talk to a boy. The most dangerous firebender of her generation, the conqueror of Ba Sing Se, the girl who defeated the Avatar, standing awkwardly at a beach party attempting to flirt and failing completely. Her approach is mechanical. Her compliments sound like threats. She has no idea how to be a normal teenager because she has never been allowed to be a normal teenager. And the scene is funny and the show plays it for comedy. But underneath the comedy is something that aches. A girl who does not know how to be liked. A girl whose only social tools are intimidation and manipulation. A girl who wants what every teenager wants: connection, acceptance, the feeling of being chosen rather than feared, and who has no idea how to get it because nobody ever taught her. That beach episode, The Beach, Season 3, Episode 5, which aired on October 19th, 2007, is the show's most concentrated portrait of villainy as a human condition. Azula, Mai, Ty Lee, and Zuko, 4 teenagers who have been shaped by war and duty and parental failure, spend a day doing normal things. Swimming, building sandcastles, going to parties, sitting around a campfire, and in each activity the damage surfaces. Mai's emotional numbness, Ty Lee's desperate need for attention, Azula's inability to connect, Zuko's anger. The campfire scene is the one that stays with you. Each character confesses something. Each confession is raw and unpolished and surprising, because these are characters the show has presented primarily as threats, and here they are being vulnerable. Azula says that her mother thought she was a monster. She says it with a smile, the way you say something that you have rehearsed so many times that it no longer hurts. But it does hurt. You can see it in the pause after the smile, the moment where the performance cracks and the pain shows through before Azula patches the crack and the smile returns, and the conversation moves on. This is the scene that proves the show's thesis about villainy, that underneath every monster is a person, that underneath every person is a story, and that the story, if you listen carefully enough, if you sit with it long enough, if you resist the urge to judge before you understand, will break your heart. The campfire goes out, the beach is dark, the 4 teenagers sit in the remains of the light, surrounded by the sound of waves, carrying the weight of their confessions, and then the show cuts away and the next episode begins, and the war continues, and the villains return to being villains, and the moments of vulnerability are buried under layers of armor and ideology and duty. But you remember the campfire, you remember the pause after the smile, you remember the scholar reading by candlelight, and the girl failing at flirting, and the prince screaming at the fire because the fire is the only thing that will listen. You remember because the show wants you to remember. Because the show's final argument about darkness is not that darkness can be defeated. It is that darkness can be understood, and understanding does not require forgiveness. It does not require absolution. It does not require you to excuse the inexcusable or justify the unjustifiable. It requires only attention, the willingness to look, the willingness to listen, the willingness to sit in the dark with the villains and hear their stories and feel, despite everything, the stubborn and irrational and necessary human impulse to care. You are sitting in the dark right now. You have been sitting in the dark for a long time. And the villains have been with you, each of them, from the pirates to the system, telling you what they are and how they were made and what they wanted and what they lost. The dark is not empty. The dark is full of stories, and the stories, if you hold them gently enough, will carry you to sleep. There is a pattern in the way the show constructs its villains that becomes visible when you lay them all out in order. The pattern is escalation. Not escalation of power, though that happens too. Escalation of intimacy. The pirates are strangers. They have no connection to the heroes. They are obstacles in the environment, like weather or geography. Their defeat costs nothing emotionally. Jet is an acquaintance. He is someone Aang and Katara trusted briefly before discovering his true nature. His villainy stings because there was a relationship, however brief. The betrayal is personal. Zhao is a rival. He occupies the same world as Zuko, competing for the same prize. His villainy is professional. He threatens the heroes, but the threat is external. The Dai Li are a system. They operate at a level above individuals. Their villainy is institutional. They threaten the heroes not through personal malice, but through structural power. Long Feng is a puppeteer. He controls the system. His villainy is strategic. He does not fight the heroes directly. He manipulates the environment around them. Combustion Man is a weapon. He threatens the heroes physically with lethal intent, and his villainy is defined by the absence of everything that makes the other villains complex. He is the reduction of a person to a function. Hama is a mirror. She reflects Katara's potential darkness. Her villainy is personal in the deepest way, not because she threatens Katara's body, but because she threatens Katara's soul. Sozin is a predecessor. He created the world the heroes inhabit. His villainy is historical. He shaped the conditions that produced every other villain on this list. Azula is a peer. She is the same age as the heroes. She is Zuko's sister, and through Zuko, she is connected to Team Avatar in the most intimate possible way. Her villainy is familial. And Ozai is a father. The ultimate intimate relationship. The person who should protect you, who should love you unconditionally, who should be the safest person in your world. Ozai is the villain who lives in your house, who sits at your table, who knows your name and your fears and your weaknesses, and uses all of them against you. The escalation of intimacy is the show's structural argument about the nature of evil. Evil is not most dangerous when it comes from strangers. It is most dangerous when it comes from the people closest to you, from the systems you live inside, from the ideologies you were taught as a child, from the father who burned your face. The villains get darker as they get closer, and the darkest villain of all, the system itself, is the one you cannot see, because you are inside it, you breathe it, you eat it, you sleep in it. It is the air, it is the water, it is the fire that keeps you warm, and the earth beneath your feet. It is everywhere, and because it is everywhere, it is invisible. And because it is invisible, it is the hardest to fight, and because it is the hardest to fight, it is the one that matters most. This is the show's final lesson about villainy, that the most dangerous darkness is the darkness you do not notice. The darkness that has been there so long that it has become the background, the default, the way things are. The darkness that does not announce itself with blue fire and cackling laughter, but that operates quietly in the spaces between the headlines, in the assumptions you never question, in the things everyone knows that no one says out loud. Avatar is a show about fighting this darkness, not with swords and bending and dramatic confrontations, but with the harder, quieter, more persistent work of seeing clearly, of noticing the assumptions, of questioning the defaults, of looking at the system and saying, this is wrong, even when the system says it is right, even when the system punishes you for seeing what it does not want you to see. Aang sees, Zuko sees, Iroh sees, and the villains, all of them, from the pirates to the Fire Lord, are defined by what they refuse to see. The pirates refuse to see that their greed has consequences. Jet refuses to see that his victims are people. Zhao refuses to see that the spirit world is real. The Dai Li refuses to see the war. Long Feng refuses to see the truth. Combustion Man refuses to see anything at all. Hama refuses to see that her victims are not her captors. Sozin refuses to see that his help is harm. Azula refuses to see that control is not love. And Ozai refuses to see his children as human beings deserving of unconditional care. The refusal to see is the source of all the darkness. And the willingness to see, which is Aang's gift, which is Zuko's redemption, which is Iroh's wisdom, is the light that opposes it. Not by destroying the darkness, by illuminating it, by making it visible, by refusing to look away. You are not looking away, you are here in the dark listening to a catalog of the cruelest characters in a show that you love. And you are not flinching, you are absorbing, you are understanding. You are doing the thing the show asks its audience to do, which is to look at the darkness and see through it to the human beings beneath it. And feel, despite everything, despite the burning and the drowning and the brainwashing and the genocide, compassion. Compassion is not the same as forgiveness. You do not need to forgive Ozai. You do not need to forgive any of them. But understanding them, seeing the mechanisms that produce them, recognizing the patterns that repeat across the show and across the real world, that is compassion. That is the show's gift to you. The ability to look at a villain and see, not a monster, but a person who was shaped by forces they did not choose and who responded to those forces in the worst possible way. A person who could have been different if one thing, just one thing, had been different in their lives. Iroh is the proof. Iroh was a Fire Nation general. He besieged Ba Sing Se. He was, for decades, a willing participant in the system that produced every villain on this list. And then his son died, and something broke, and the breaking let the light in, and Iroh became the wisest, kindest, most compassionate character in the entire series. If Iroh can change, anyone can change. If Iroh, who was inside the system, who is the system, can step outside it and see it clearly and choose a different path, then the system is not invincible. The darkness is not permanent. The cycle can be broken. This is the hope that the show places at the bottom of its darkest well. Beneath all the villains, beneath all the cruelty, beneath all the damage and the trauma and the systemic evil, hope. Small and stubborn and unreasonable and persistent. The hope that people can change, that systems can change, that the world, broken as it is, can be repaired. Not quickly, not easily, not by one person or one battle or one comet-enhanced showdown, but slowly, over time, through the accumulated choices of millions of people who decide, each in their own way, each in their own moment, to see clearly, to choose kindness, to value something other than power. The villains of Avatar are dark. The world that produced them is darker. But the show's argument, whispered through 3 seasons and 1,000 scenes, and a finale that chose mercy over killing, is that the darkness is not the final word. That the final word is light. And the light is not a weapon. It is a choice, a practice, a habit, a way of seeing that once adopted cannot be abandoned, because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. And the clarity, painful as it is the beginning of everything good. In Book 2, Chapter 5, a villager says you can tell a lot about a person by who their enemies are. And this is true. But you can also tell a lot about a show by the villains it creates. A show that creates simple villains wants simple stories. A show that creates complex villains wants something harder, something deeper, something that does not end when the credits roll but continues in the minds of the people who watched it as a conversation about the nature of evil and the possibility of good and the distance between the two, which is not a distance at all but a choice, made every day by everyone in the quiet moments when no one is watching and the only audience is your own conscience. The villains are quiet now. The darkness is quiet. The show is quiet. And you are here, in the quiet, carrying what you have heard, letting it settle, feeling the weight of it and the warmth of it and the truth of it, which is not a comfortable truth but a necessary one. Darkness has causes. Causes can be addressed, and the addressing is the work. The real work. The work that never ends. If you found something worth carrying away tonight, subscribing helps more than you would think. Thank you for staying. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.